It was seeming like we were going to be in for a relatively boring trade deadline here in 2025, with Jimmy Butler trade suitors seemingly dwindling by the day. Luckily enough for us fans who are so desperately fiending for a blockbuster trade, our friends over in Sacramento might just have us covered after De'Aaron Fox told them that he wants out. I'm going to pump the brakes really quick here by just saying that De'Aaron Fox did not go directly to the Kings front office and say, hey, trade me. It was rather his butt buddy Rich Paul that did all the dirty work for him. Rich Paul reportedly went straight to Sacramento's front office according to The Athletic and said that it would be quote-unquote wise to move Fox now. If by some chance you're not quite familiar with Rich Paul's language, this is basically the closest thing in the NBA that you can have to a death threat. In all seriousness, if Rich Paul says that you should handle his client a certain way, unfortunately for that NBA team, it's probably best that you listen to him at least somewhat, or else it could be pretty rough sailing there on out. And it seems like that's exactly what Sacramento intends to do with them opening up trades for De'Aaron Fox prior to the February deadline. Now let's kind of move on to what this really means for Sacramento and for De'Aaron Fox himself. For starters, this is the dagger, the knockout blow, the nail in the coffin for whatever this Big Three experiment of Fox, Sabonis, and DeMar DeRozan was supposed to be. The Kings find themselves in one of the weirdest spots in all of basketball. After they expected to be at least a playoff team coming into this year, they now find themselves at the 10th seed in the final play-in spot, just a game and a half above the Golden State Warriors, despite an 11-4 record since Doug Christie took over the team. Them opening up trades for Fox kind of answers one question, but it also brings along a slew of even more questions. It's great that they've decided that they're going to trade De'Aaron Fox potentially, but also what are they going to actually be looking for in a trade? On one hand, I can totally see them going out and trying to get another win-now player in exchange for De'Aaron Fox, especially with them not owning their own pick in the offseason. There could easily be enough delusion within that franchise that they could stay competitive with DeRozan and Sabonis if they're able to get another all-star caliber player back for Fox. On the other hand, the majority of the teams, aka the Spurs and the Rockets, that are going to be vying for Fox don't really have the necessary all-star piece that the Kings might want back in that kind of situation, but what they do have is a slew of young talent and draft picks that they can afford to give up. I think the vast majority of us would lean towards going after the young players and picks, but it's easier to say that from a fan's perspective. It's easy for a fan to go, hey, Domantas Sabonis and DeMar DeRozan, that doesn't work as a core for your two players on a playoff team or to have any real success come postseason time. We gotta take a look at it from the Kings front office perspective. This is a team who has been pretty much irrelevant for their entire existence since the late 1960s up until the past few years, and a lot of that has been because of De'Aaron Fox. I can understand a franchise being hesitant to fade back into irrelevancy where they've been forever and also getting rid of their best homegrown talent since DeMarcus Cousins. What I'm not going to do here is go over 20 or 30 different hypothetical mock trades that have the same chance of happening as Sidney Sweeney giving me a
No. God, that's weird.
Anyways, so let's say that the Kings trade De'Aaron Fox for a package surrounding Stephon Castle to the Spurs or a package surrounding Jalen Green to the Rockets. That is a really big piece to potentially jumpstart a rebuild, but then that would lead to them having to probably trade DeRozan and Sabonis too, because if you're not going to fully commit to a rebuild, then that trade really doesn't do a whole lot for you. With San Antonio and Houston both having huge treasure chests of draft picks as well to offer to Sacramento, there's a real avenue where the Kings can become one of the richest teams in terms of young assets in the whole NBA.
Kiss my rich butt, losers! Woo! Woo!
If the Spurs or Rockets do happen to trade for Fox, they'd likely be giving up a Stephon Castle or a Jalen Green on top of a handful of first and second round picks. Then that would lead opportunity for the Kings to possibly trade Sabonis in the offseason, and total in net return for both of those guys, you could end up with 4 to 5 first round picks on top of a handful of seconds, as well as a handful of good young players. As awesome as that sounds to me, it might not be as simple for the Kings because they might have that doubt that any of those players or the picks that they get and draft players with will ever end up becoming as good as De'Aaron Fox ever was or ever will be. The Kings have really come to a crossroad right now because they have to decide with this trade whether they're going to try to salvage any bit of success with their current group that they can have, which realistically their ceiling is probably a first round exit, or are they going to clean house and have a fire sale where they can have a real chance at an actual rebuild, which they failed to do the last time when they traded Tyrese Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis. Although the Spurs were listed as Fox's preferred destination, that doesn't necessarily mean that has to be the team to trade for him, and the Rockets don't have to be the only other team that's also in that race. Throw it back to when Donovan Mitchell was traded to the Cavs. Absolutely no one thought that there was any chance that he'd go to Cleveland, and much less thought that he'd re-sign with Cleveland, but that's exactly what happened. Fox still has a year and a half left on his deal. That's about 2 playoff runs for a contending team to possibly convince Fox that he wants to stay. A team that no one has talked about, but I think really should be, is the Denver Nuggets, and I want them to be all over a De'Aaron Fox trade if they're possibly willing to do so. With seeing how not aggressive the Nuggets have been in recent years, I don't exactly expect it to happen, but I really do like the idea of a potential Jamal Murray for De'Aaron Fox swap, especially if the Kings decide they want to try to stay competitive. At the very least, the Nuggets would also have to part way with a few draft picks, which they've been reluctant to do so in years past, so I'm not exactly confident in that happening, but at the same time, we've already seen this year how a guy like Russell Westbrook, who plays with pace, can benefit from playing with a guy like Jokic, who really dictates the entire pace of a game by himself. If you give him a guy like De'Aaron Fox, I legit think that puts the Nuggets back into possible title favorite contention. If anyone's on-court abilities could convince someone to stay at a certain place, I think Nikola Jokic is probably that guy. But with this trade request, I actually want to talk briefly about De'Aaron Fox's side of things from a personal or player perspective. Now, usually I am not a big fan of players requesting trades. I think this whole Jimmy situation is a complete and utter mess. But this is really a different scenario because De'Aaron Fox has done everything that he possibly can for this Kings organization, and time again they fail him. This is now Fox's 8th year in the league, and with that his 8th in Sacramento, and he's made the playoffs just once.
That sounds awful. What are you talking about, awful?
Now, these shortcomings can hardly be attributed to Fox, but it goes to show that the Kings have done absolutely nothing to surround him with players that elevate this team and takes them to the next level. They made the playoffs once, they were content with that, and then ended up signing DeMar DeRozan, which is probably the last thing you want to do in this day and age to try and build a real contender. There's really nothing left in Sacramento for De'Aaron Fox, and it's unfortunate, but it's the reality of things, and I really can't blame him for wanting a brighter future, especially after giving that franchise pretty much everything that he has and more. Unfortunately, I can't tell you where De'Aaron Fox is going to go. I can't tell you what the Kings are going to decide to do. But what I can tell you is that the rest of the league should be shaking in their boots at the possibility of Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox sharing the court together.
Good luck.
No second. Give me a second one.
No, I don't want to.
I want a second one.